If you're getting ready to paint your AT-ST from Star Wars Legion, stick around. I got some great tips for how to do that, including how to get some results that look like this guy here. It's an awesome model. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, this is Jarrett. Welcome to another Frankenstein style tutorial where I forgot to turn my lav mic on for the first 1/3 or so of the video. So this portion I'm showing right now, I lost a lot of the things I was saying. But in any case, if you're here to learn how to paint an AT-ST for Star Wars Legion, you came to the right place. You can see that I started out by basically priming the whole model with like a very dark color. So you can use, you know, like a spray black primer, but in my case I used Vallejo Surface Primer airbrush primer, and I went with a German dark gray color, but you can see in the video it's pretty darn close to black anyways. And then from there I'm applying an airbrush base coat of GW Mechanicus Standard Gray, I believe it's called. It's like a kind of a nice dark blue, almost a bluish gray color, and I pretty much just build it up on all the different panels, trying to leave a bit of a dark line between some of them from the primer. And I do this all over the model, and in some cases sort of doing a bit of an angle spray so as to retain a little bit of the shading in the dark, in the deepest recesses. So like on those legs and things like that, I was doing that. For this next portion, I went in with a highlight of Wolf Gray by Vallejo Game Air. It's kind of like a Space Wolf Gray or a Fenrisian Gray from GW, and I'm pretty much going to apply this the same way I was applying the Mechanicus Gray. You know, this is almost an optional step. If you like that darker gray that I've got there, you could almost stop with that if you're, you know, depending on what look you're going for and how much effort you want to put into the model. But for me, I was going to go for a fairly bright gray on mine. Well, I certainly ended up with one, you'll see. And really it's the same thing. I'm just highlighting all the different panels, trying to retain a little bit of the dark, you know, the dark undertones showing through in spots. But overall, you'll see over the course of this section that I really do lighten it up dramatically. There's also a part where you won't really be able to see it, but I had to add a little bit more airbrush thinner. Usually Vallejo air paints are, you know, you can pretty much spray them out of the bottle, but if you're finding it's going on, for me it was speckling, which means, you know, instead of a nice atomization, it was, well, speckled as it was hitting the model. So I added some more thinner to that. You can see it there, it's Vallejo thinner, and that helped a bit. And so from there I just basically highlight the same way I was doing it with the Mechanicus. And if you don't have an airbrush, same thing. If you get a regular sort of Fenrisian gray or some other lighter gray and a large brush, you can pretty much just brush this on the panels, and you could dry brush it on if you want to get like a nice sort of scratch textured look on it. There's all different ways you can come at it, but the general gist of this is we're building up from a dark base coat to this lighter base coat. Alright, just to warn you, I'm about to switch over to the original audio where I figured out that my lav mic was not turned on, and so you're going to suddenly start hearing my airbrush and stuff like that. So if you got your volume cranked, you might want to turn it down for a sec just as we transition over. A little bit of the Mechanicus gray showing. I think I'm gonna switch up. I'm still getting more speckling than I'm happy with. One sec. Okay, so guys, I switched over. I added some thinner medium again to my airbrush, quite a bit actually, and I've switched to this Game Color Wolf Gray, which is not an airbrush color. I actually think it may be a slightly different tone and a bit less bluish, but whatever, I'll figure that out in a minute. But yeah, I was getting it's going on kind of speckly. I don't know if you can see it or not in the video, but I was not digging that. So I'm gonna see if this goes on a little nicer. Yeah, see, already I can tell it's going on a bit like nicer, for lack of a better word. Less speckly. Front here. Although in a way, something about the surface of this guy makes me think it actually might kind of look cool that it's a little speckly, because give it a bit of texture, bit of a gray metal panel texture kind of vibe. I'm kind of making excuses, but I actually do think that. There's that top edge. It's got a nice solid kind of highlight on it now on purpose, which is a weird thing to say. Doing some angle highlights where I basically just spray it without trying to get in every nook and cranny, and by doing so I hit the raised areas but not the, you know, it leaves some dark areas in the recesses so you can see the details and stuff. One thing I was saying before I realized my microphone wasn't on is I'm painting this guy. God, I even talked about how awesome he was. I'm painting this guy for my own army actually, so I'm not too fussed about making him look incredible or anything, and he's not going to be for any painting contests or anything like that. So I just, you know, I want him to look good, but I'm not going to kill myself with every little detail. I want to make him look very, very table ready. I want him to look really kick-ass, but and what I was also saying before I realized my microphone wasn't on is the ATSTs are very, because they're so gray. So guys, one thing I'm doing as a bit of an experiment actually is I'm going to use some glaze medium, this stuff. I put some in my airbrush, right? And I'm going to put some of that Mechanicus standard gray, I think it's called. I keep hoping I'm getting the name right. Put about, you know, a third of that in there. Create like a very, very diluted glaze of the original, like the base coat that I put on the primer.
I'm going to see if I can, I just want to add a little glazing to a few areas to sort of reduce that speckling effect I was getting in some spots. The speckling just means that the airbrush paint was effectively splattering, but at a very fine, in a very fine way. It wasn't atomizing very well. Probably my fault, but this may help to sort of bring back some of that smoothness to a few of the gradients. Hopefully it's going to go on pretty thin, or I'm just going to mess up my nice highlights. One or the other, we'll see. But I'm going to do it in a few subtle spots. I'll do it on the foot here. I'm pretty light on the air. I'm just doing it very softly. Slowly, effectively, just trying to do it without... Yeah, I think that looks good, actually. Just not blasting it, right? Because then I'll just end up with a thick gray line. I lied, I'm doing it on purpose in a couple spots. So, I mean, hopefully, when you're painting it, you're not going to have to do this. But if you are learning to airbrush, this might give you a sense of how you can fix things that don't maybe go right the first time. It's one way. Just adding it into a few of the sort of shading. Effectively, I'm shading it in a few spots. This part makes me nervous if I really like how I've got this side here done already, so I don't want to mess it up. Yeah, that's alright. And then the underside of the gun turret thingy. I know it has a name, I just can't seem to remember it right now. Quite a bit of speckling here. I'm going to try to sort of blend in a bit. A little bit of color modulation, you know, just subtle hints of it throughout some of this paneling may not be the worst idea. To break it up a little bit. Very speckly in there. Nothing like a tutorial where I make a big mistakes and try to fix it. That said, I'm digging him. I think he's looking good. I'll just slightly blend these two panels a bit. Add a bit of that. Like that. Okay. Just every once in a while when you're airbrushing, clean the tip. Just pull the paint right off of it with your gloved hand or your regular fingers, whatever. Your ungloved fingers. Because this guy, like I said, one way we're going to sort of make him awesome is weathering, and it's going to help because in some places, if necessary, I can hide like mistakes or things that don't look as great as they could by weathering. Maybe a little bit of blast marker damage and things like that. I'm not literally going to damage the model. I'm not really looking for that effect, but I may add like scorch marks and stuff and streaking and whatnot, and that'll help. Some chipping, stuff like that. And by the time that's all done and in place, I think we'll be looking great. Okay, I'm going to do very subtle. Oh, there's a bit of a tide mark here where I must have applied a little too much of that. Just a super subtle gray on some of these like really white spots. See how it gives you a little bit of modeling, but nothing too crazy. So just kind of breaks up that uniformity a bit. Same with the front. Really light. Almost so light you can't see it, but hopefully you can. I'll leave the back. I think I'm okay with those. And so I'm barely pushing on the airbrush needle trigger thingy. All right, here and there. All right, it's looking badass. I love this model. Alright guys, next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint a few metallic areas on this to kind of mix it up and not just have the whole guy be, or the whole thing be like this light gray color. I think I'm going to do like guns in the front of this concussion grenade launcher and things like that. I'm just going to use like a metal color. What metal color am I going to use? Let's see. I think I'll use gunmetal. I'm going to use this one, but you can use again lead belcher or you know, any Vallejo gunmetal type color would be fine. It's just a metallic, nothing fancy. And I'm just going to paint it on to a few areas to mix things up like I said. Get my brush. And I'm not being too precious about this, to be honest. I'm just, you know, I don't need these to look incredible. I'm just going to paint the weapons this gunmetal color. There's like a kind of a gear looking thing here for rotating the weapon, I think, up and down, so I'm going to paint that metallic as well. Okay, and then I'll just try and split this out a little bit. Like I said, the front of the concussion grenade launcher. Try to keep the metal on the outer part, basically. All right. So now I'm just looking around at things that I think could be painted metal color. Like the back vents would probably look good with metallic. I don't think I'll paint them completely and wash them or give them a wash. I think I'll just lightly brush over the grills themselves. They're already a bit shaded from previous coats of paint and stuff. Just going for a nice tabletop quality here, of course. Nothing too crazy. What else? Looking for other stuff that would look good as a metallic color. So the first thing I'm going to do to weather this guy is sort of the opposite of edge highlighting, okay? On a lot of, let's say, Warhammer type vehicles or GW type Space Marines, things like that, tanks, you see edge highlighting, so a very bright edge along the, along each panel and things like that. But what I'm going to do is actually do a dark line on each edge of each panel, and that's like for weathering, and it'll look like the paint has sort of rubbed off on all the edge surfaces of this guy. I'm going to use I can't even see the label anymore, but it's Army Painter, and I'm pretty sure it's matte black. And if that's what you want to look for, is a matte black color. I mean, it doesn't have to be matte if you don't have it. It could just be black, but I'm using matte. What you're going to do is take some of the black, and don't have too much on your brush, or it very easily will get away from you and make too much of a mess. But we're basically just going to very lightly do this blackish color. Hopefully you can see that going on along the edges of, and it doesn't have to be neat and uniform, and in fact it should not be. All the edges of any paneling and stuff and any surfaces, pretty much any edge you can find, just do this like light matte black lining, or brush perpendicular to the edge to make it easier on yourself. Don't try to brush along the edge the way I'm doing it here, see? And once that's kind of everywhere, it'll create a nice effect of the whole thing having been sort of scraped up along any edges. Let's see, I'm going to do the tops of these. Like I said, it is easy to accidentally get this where you don't want it, so just take your time. Pull your brush along the edge. Technically, it's almost easier than like edge highlighting, where you're trying to get a really nice uniform highlight along the edge of things. Here, I'm actually trying to make it look a little more wear and tearish, so it doesn't have to look perfect. I'm not going to do it on this rounded edge, because that's not where the paint would technically like scrape off. but, or just look old. It just kind of helps sort of age it. I don't know if scraped paint is actually what I'm achieving here, but same in the back here. Need more paint, don't be afraid to go get some more on your brush. If you get a little bit here and there, that's okay too, because like I said, we're weathering this guy. We're trying to make him look like he's been through some fights and stuff, and he's not brand new. So a little bit of streaking here and there isn't going to hurt him. And actually will probably look kind of cool. And this is like a pretty easy effect to apply. You're really just brushing against the edges. So I'll stop talking and go ahead and finish this before we move on to the next step. Alright guys, so the next step I'm going to add, so here you can see, it's probably really subtle and hard to notice on the camera, but it's there. Dark edging all around the various panels and hard edges and stuff. And the next step is going to be to just add some paint chipping. So I'm going to use Rhinox hide from Citadel. And some of you probably know where I'm going with this. I'm going to take a piece of like blister foam. Pretty much any kind of foam, spongy stuff would work, I think, as long as it's got fairly small cells or whatever. I don't know. It's not a super coarse sponge. I'm just going to dip it in my Rhinox. Wipe some off because you don't want to blob it on too much. Close your pot so you don't dry it out. And then just, you know, a little goes a long way with weathering, so I'm going to start to just dab it very, very lightly to create paint chipping. You want to turn the sponge occasionally to kind of like avoid doing the same pattern in an area. Up along here, I'm going to do some where we didn't do the dark edge on this upper edge here. Pretty much anywhere that it's like either looks like it would get worn, or it's a bit of a hard edge area, or it's too much white and you want to just break it up a little with some of this, too much gray or whatever. Go back and get some more when it starts to dry out. Put a little more here and there. It's really subtle, hopefully you can see it. I don't know if you can. Let's see. So I am going to take that approach and do it all over, including the feet. And so I'll just do a bit more and then I'll pause. And if you're getting too little of chips, of course you can either dab it harder or, you know, get a little more paint on your brush. You can probably see these chips a bit better, going a little heavier with these. And even if it seems like a flat area where you would not see chipping, just a teensy bit of it can help to just add a little visual interest and break up some of that monotony of the gray paneling. Think about where he'd get hit with rocks and blaster fire and stuff like that. Maybe collide with things. See, sometimes you're going to just get a blob that you don't like. What I usually do, surprise, surprise, is try to wipe it off with my finger. Can usually get most of it. And if it leaves, honestly, if it leaves a bit of a dark patch somewhere, that just kind of feeds into the weathering anyway. Get like oil staining and things like that. And do the I'm getting blobs that if your blobs are just going on too big, just dab off some of the paint off your sponge, like I just did. And yeah, so I'm going to continue that all over him, and I'll be right back. All right, guys. So hopefully you can see some of the paint chipping. I go heavier around things like hatches because that's where people go in and out a lot, so that paint would get scraped up. And It's kind of, I can't tell if you can see it on the camera, just looking at the LCD screen here, but there is little chipping all over it, just to show wear and tear. Hopefully you can see some of that. Anyway, it is there. And by the way, I also have painted the inside of the two windshield areas just black, because I don't think you need to try and paint an actual windshield there personally. More power to you if you want to. I think now, just as a really quick step, I'm going to wash those some of the metal things I painted with a gloss Nuln oil from Citadel. So that's Nuln oil gloss, if I can find it. Yeah. So the reason I'm using gloss, and I think I mentioned this before, is it'll do a better job on a metallic surface of shading the metallic without taking away the shine of the metallic. Okay, so what I was going to say is I was going to do a little bit of dust work on the feet as if he's walking through desert sand, because my bases are desert, as you probably saw in the other video. However, I don't have, and I was going to do it with pigments, so the powdery stuff. I don't have one that I like the color of for this, so instead I'm going to use, I don't know why I'm showing you this because it's not labeled the way you would recognize it. It's Zandri Dust by Citadel, and I'm going to airbrush it on. I'm making it about 50-50 glaze medium to Zandri Dust, and I'm just going to mix it up for a sec in my airbrush here. And this is going to be the same story where I'm going really, I'm going to try not to like blast this stuff on and just create like an opaque yellow look, because that's not what we're going for here. We're just going for dust. Okay, so let's see. Okay, here's one foot. So you'll barely even notice it going on at first, which is good because I'm trying very hard not to overdo it. The glaze medium is really helping with that, actually, so I can actually open up the airway quite a bit and it's not going to like wreck it. So being a little more liberal. Same thing over here. The dust would probably cover up the scorch and the chips depending on when this all happened, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. You know, just looks like he's been walking through desert sand, which we will add later. That's been going up roughly, you know, onto his ankles and feet. Get some of the back. Alright, I went a little too heavy back there. Just like I said, you shouldn't. Magic thumb wipes them off. There you go. Hopefully you can see that. And for me, other than after a bit, I'll probably just pick a color and paint that on. I don't think that's something you need a tutorial for. I think the bulk of this, what I've done so far, is what you'd really want to take away from this video. Yeah, I think he's pretty much ready for battle. I'm going to hit him with a matte varnish. I'll do that off camera. I don't think you need to watch that either. And I will probably do a video about how I do his base later. It'll be a separate tutorial, because really you guys will probably end up doing your own base on this guy anyway. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully you can make this guy look like a kick-ass, battle-damaged rebel destroyer. And I hope this has been educational, and we'll see you next time. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Take care.